This video is something of a sequel, or is at least related to my video on how love of money is the root of all evil. It talks more about what love of matter looks like and contrasting it with love of abstract ideals. So I'll just get into it. Um, I think if a person loves only those things which he's seen with his eyes, so that usually means matter, like money, land, or hot women. It could also be something like social status, although that is getting a little bit more abstract. Anyway, if you love only those things which you've seen with your eyes, like money, land, or hot women, I think this produces a couple effects on a person. One is that that person probably can't be creative. If he doesn't want anything that he hasn't already seen, then he's not going to think of anything which he hasn't already seen. I think that's why most people actually are not very creative. I think what's in your heart produces creativity as much as what's in your brain. And because there only exists a finite quantity of material things such as money, land, or hot women, or social status, or whatever, any person who wants those things is going to be at war with every other person who wants those things, because not everybody can have as much as he wants. So I think that means a purely materialistic person, cannot have genuine love of other people in his heart. In contrast, if a person loves some kind of abstract ideal, then I think it ought to be possible to have genuine creativity and love of other people. And creativity, because abstract ideals are general in nature, there could be many particular circumstances that would fit with a particular ideal, and some of those circumstances might not exist yet. So, as an example, I read the autobiography of Henry Ford a little while ago, and he almost said this explicitly, although he wasn't thinking in terms like what I did. But he basically said explicitly that he thinks improving the material circumstances of people to make their material circumstances easier is an ideal for him. He thinks it's very important to make people's lives materially easier. And he also talked about how he had an interest and natural aptitude in mechanical things since he was a child. So interest in aptitude of mechanical things plus an ideal of wanting to make people's lives materially easier produced the Model T and all the other cars he built, and the manufacturing method and the business method he developed. It wasn't just the Model T he developed. He built lots of things. The Model T was just the best of what he was able to build after getting a lot of experience. And he also had several ideas about how to manage people and industry, and lots of people copied him. Actually, they copied the material, like the material techniques in his factory pretty well, but they didn't copy the business organization very well. Anyway, the fact that he loved material improvement as an ideal, I think, is a big part of the reason why he was able to make material objects which hadn't existed before. That's just one example, but I think for anybody who does anything that's never been done before, it's because he loves an ideal, and that a certain material circumstance which doesn't exist yet would fit that ideal better than things which already exist. And as for being able to love other people better, if a person has some kind of ideal about how people ought to live together, then they're not necessarily going to be at war over a particular material thing. Like maybe if a person thinks that a person ought to keep the fruits of his own labor, then if he loves that ideal enough, he's not necessarily going to go steal something just because he can. Or if you hold marriage as an ideal, then you'll treat your spouse right when you find her, and probably respect other people's marriages too. But if you see marriage just as a convenient way of getting to a particular person you want, then I think it's unlikely you'll respect other people's marriages, or that you'll hold on to your spouse or that person if circumstances change, like if you find somebody hotter or something. So yeah, I think love of ideals comes before love of individual people if you are a genuinely loving person. And loving the ideal means that you're willing to give up some material benefit. Like if I just wanted as much pussy as possible, I wouldn't be respecting other people's marriages. But because I like marriage as an ideal, I am genuinely disgusted by the idea of going after somebody else's girl, and it's always been that way for me. Um, and I first had this thought actually when I was thinking about how it. I noticed that I studied physics at university and I've never come up with any kind of physics which hasn't been thought of before. At least nothing that's actually very exciting. I think I might have come up with a couple trivial examples, trivial particular manifestations of physics that I hadn't learned from other people, but um, nothing that I'm going, not even close to anything that would make me famous. But I have thought of lots of philosophical, psychological, and religious ideas which seem to me to be true that no one else has thought of before, and I was wondering why that is. And I think the reason is that I love truth in a general abstract way that I don't think hardly anyone else has for at least a few generations. I love truth in the factual, rational, and moral senses altogether. And I think most people don't do that. There are like physicists who study factual and rational truth, and mathematicians who only study rational truth, and religious people who care about moral truth, but it seems like those people hardly ever come together. And I'm interested in all those things, and I think that's why I can have the thoughts that I have that no one else has had yet. Oh, I think it may be that like monks, like 1,000 years ago, may have had a similar attitude to me, but the scientific method hadn't existed yet, so they couldn't come up with the stuff that they didn't have access to knowledge that I have, which is probably why I am able to think of things similar to them, but in a somewhat different way than they were able to do it. But in contrast, people as smart or smarter than me have loved scientific truth for a couple hundred years. So it makes sense that I got the impression after being at university for a couple of years, no matter how hard I tried, I would never think of any new physics that were very exciting. And I think that's probably the reason that lots of smart people have already worked on this. And so it's a matter that they cared about solving the problem, this physics problem, more than people have cared about the stuff I've thought about recently. Anyway, move on to the next topic. It seems to me a lot of Christians love Jesus as like a thing, like they say they love Jesus and that's the end of their religion, but they don't actually do any of the things that Jesus tells them to do. I think Jesus even says in the New Testament somewhere that he who loves me will follow my commandments. So Jesus makes sense to me as some kind of abstract ideal, like somebody who tells you to live this certain way, and I think it is beautiful in a lot of ways. But he doesn't make sense to me as a person because I've never met him. But anyway, most Christians, it seems to me, say they love Jesus, but they don't do any of the things he says. And that to me, in the context of what I'm talking about now, kind of makes Jesus into a material thing, while actually ignoring everything he cared about and stood for. I think if you really do love Jesus, you'll love the same things that Jesus did. So why was I saying that? Yeah, I think a lot of people pretend to love ideals just so they can be in the social in-group that holds those ideals, but they don't actually know or care very much about what the ideals are. That's most people. And so it gave me the idea that building a good society depends on finding good people who genuinely care about the ideals that the society is founded on. And I think if people live together with the ideal that like we can work together and follow rules and everybody will be better off because of it, they might actually get more material success than people who only care about material success, because people with ideals can work together peacefully, and people who only love matter will steal from each other and fight each other and things like that. But whenever there's some kind of material success, which I think always comes from some kind of love and ideal, people who don't care about the ideal are going to come in because they want the money and the success, and they're going to pretend to love the ideal so they can get along with the people who are already there. And I think it's very hard to avoid this situation. How do you know who's being honest? And the only things I thought of so far kind of related to this are if somebody is genuinely creative or at least independent. I suppose creativity depends on loving something that no one else has loved before, plus being smarter than anyone else who's loved that thing before. So like you could have your heart in the right place but just not be smarter than someone who's already done it before, in which case you'd be an independent person but not maybe not a creative one if somebody's already done everything that you would be able to do. So creativity and independence of spirit, I think, are signs that somebody has a good heart. And if somebody shows by their actions that they love ideals more than material circumstances, that's also proof that they love the ideal more than whatever thing they could get. So like, since marriage is important to me, I could talk about that again. Like if somebody has the opportunity to cheat on his spouse with somebody super hot, but he doesn't do it, that's probably a pretty good sign that he has genuine morals, he has genuine love of ideals in his heart. And I think the Amish are a very good example. I think one of the reasons the Amish have been so successful for so long is partially because they have to give up a lot of modern conveniences. So nobody's going to live with the Amish who loves like his TV more than living the way the Amish feel like you ought to live. So basically the fact that someone is Amish, when he has a chance to have more material wealth doing something else, it is proof that he loves the Amish way of life more than whatever material circumstances he could have. And that's everything I wanted to talk about in this video.